Hello everyone, I'm bringing you a video today looking at an item I've had in the collection for a very long time and never really talked about on the channel previously. I'm sure this is an item which is very well known to most viewers, and this is the British issued Lifebelt intended primarily for amphibious assault troops. And it's based on a Royal Navy design, and we're going to compare it to that in the video and talk a little bit more about both designs in comparison. I have made a video talking about the Royal Navy issue example previously, the sort of progenitor of the main topic of this video. So we're going to have a look at these two and compare them now. So here we have the two Lifebelts we're going to talk about. The example nearest the camera is of course the main topic of the video. What we're going to do is compare this to the Royal Navy example, which predated it and formed the basis for this design. We'll have a look at the Royal Navy example at the top here, furthest from the camera, first of all. Then we'll have a look at this one in a bit more detail, and the differences between them will become evident. There are some obvious differences. This doesn't have a cover, for example. Materials used are somewhat different. We'll talk about that in some detail. First of all, the Royal Navy Lifebelt here. This is something I have covered on the channel previously in some detail, so I won't get into a huge amount of detail now. This is essentially a rubber bladder with a blue outer cover. A rubber tube here with a manual inflation valve which can be screwed open and closed. So screws open, screws closed, and you simply blow into the nozzle here to inflate it. It ties around the body with one section of cotton twill cord or tape rather, going up around the neck and tying off to this loop on the front here. This also secures the inflation tube out of the way when not required. And then on each end we have a section of the same cotton twill tape which ties around the waist. So that's basically as simple as you can get in terms of life-saving equipment, inflatable life-saving equipment. It's just a rubber belt that ties around the waist. And for a dedicated piece of Royal Navy issue life-saving equipment, this is really lacking. There was a lot of talk of this during the war and how really Royal Navy life-saving equipment wasn't up to snuff, wasn't very good. And in the immediate post-war years, a lot of time and effort was put into improving it. And I've talked about life jackets previously on the channel, which resulted from that sort of head scratching of how can we do this better, because a rubber ring tied around the waist is really not a very good design, and there were certainly better ways of doing it. However, these were also used by the army in certain instances, notably the commandos, when involved in amphibious operations. This is what was available and therefore it's what was used. So as I say, much as it's not ideal, it sort of was what was around and its design that was in use at the time. The idea of equipping large numbers of amphibious troops, so troops involved in an amphibious assault, with this style of life jacket was a problem, or lifebelt rather, was a problem. Uses rubber, of course, quite a large section of rubber, which is not ideal. Rubber was a scarce commodity during the war. And obviously, there's a bit of time and effort spent in making these, the cover and so forth. They are not complex to make, but there's some time and effort involved in that. So what we have underneath, and the main topic of this video, of course, as I say, is this simplified version, which basically functions in the same way, ties around the body in exactly the same manner, but is greatly simplified in terms of manufacturing. Materials used are also more readily available, and from that point of view, it's a much better design for use en masse as an almost disposable item to provide some buoyancy, some life-saving capability to assault troops. And this of course became necessary as the idea of large-scale amphibious landings loomed large, not only for obviously operations in North Africa, but also in mainland Europe as well. So the idea, the need for something like this was becoming more pressing. This, as I say, functions in basically exactly the same manner. It is a belt that's worn around the body. It's manually inflated with a tube on the front, as you can see here, but it's made of a waterproof sort of canvas material, which we have here, which, as you can see, is glued together. And this does still hold air. I have test inflated it and deflated it, and it does still hold air. So it's held up well, considering it is essentially a somewhat disposable item. You can see all the glued seams there, the detail of construction. And we've got that folded over section at the top there, reinforced with a section of tape glued across, and then the same at the rear here. And you can see the glue has been liberally applied, come to the end of a section of tape there, so they've just glued up to here, put some more glue on and set off again, as you can see. So not wasting any materials, of course, very important. Where the straps attach, where the tape attaches that goes up around the neck at the front here, we have reinforcing sections, and then that's sewn through those, as you can see, or sewn through and then glued on, as you can see there. We just have a loop here. We don't have those loops running around as we did on the cover for the Royal Navy Lifebelt. We just have a loop stitched on there for this to tie off to when it passes around the neck. And then at each end, you can see here, we again have that reinforcement and a glued on section where this has been stitched through at the end there. This extra section glued on to reinforce where the waist tapes attach, and there at each end, as you can see, and they would just tie off around the waist. You can see where some of the glues got on the strap there and discoloured it, but doesn't matter, of course, it's still perfectly functional. And then at the front here, we have the inflation tube, just as we had on the Royal Navy issue example. You can see where this passes through, it's then glued in position with this reinforcing piece here. This is the most complex piece of the whole lot, really, is the rubber tube, the rubber section here where the valve attaches, and you basically have the same style of manual valve there and the same style of mouthpiece to blow into in order to inflate this. Rather than this tucking underneath the strap, obviously we don't have a strap here, we've glued on a little section of the same material the rest of the Lifebelt is made from, with a loop here for this to tuck away under when it's not required, just for the sake of neatness. Obviously this could get in the way if it was flapping around. So there it is. Quick look at this, really. There's not a huge amount to it. It's a very simple design. It's literally an inflatable belt that ties around the waist and up around the neck to provide some buoyancy. And these would be worn underneath equipment. That was the intention. Equipment, if you went into the water, equipment could be dumped. That gives you some buoyancy to sort of overcome the weight of boots and uniform and so forth. Obviously, if you went into the water, it would be a good idea to get rid of your boots as well. That would certainly assist you, but this would give you some extra buoyancy, which would help to overcome that weight. And as I say, it's not designed to hold up the weight of the equipment and everything as well, but certainly a soldier in a wet uniform, the idea is this would give some additional buoyancy and some extra time to be rescued. So there it is, a quick look at this British amphibious, I guess you could say, amphibious operations Lifebelt. Quite an interesting but relatively simple design, as you could see, basically borrowed from Royal Navy practice, which was lacking as far as sort of dedicated life-saving equipment is concerned, but not too bad when it comes to a sort of semi-disposable item like this. So I hope you found it interesting looking at this. As I say, an item that's probably very familiar to the majority of viewers on the channel, but hopefully it's been interesting looking at this particular example in detail. If you have found this video interesting and you'd like to see more of this sort of thing, please do consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. And whether you're newly subscribing or you've previously subscribed, please do make sure you hit the little bell, the notification button down below. That will of course alert you when I upload future videos. If you really like my uploads and you would like to support the channel, you can. Both Patreon and PayPal are linked down below. And as I always say, a huge thank you to everybody who supports the channel using those two methods. It really is greatly appreciated. As I always say, thank you very much indeed. If you'd like to follow the channel on social media, you can. Facebook, Instagram and Twitter are all linked down below. And if you'd like to get in touch but you don't really use social media, there is of course an email address in the description as well. That's everything for this video. So until next time, bye for now.